Welcome to Getting Better with Dr. Adam. Dr. Adam Silberstein is a clinical psychologist who has been working in the field since 1993. With a broad range of clinical experience, including state psychiatric hospitals, adolescent residential treatment with a trauma focus, the Department of Corrections, and in the addiction treatment arena. He is currently in private practice and is the clinical director and co-founder of Westside Treatment, a young adult dual diagnosis treatment facility in West LA. This podcast is for general information and entertainment purposes only. This should not be considered treatment advice, nor is it a substitute for an individual treatment plan. If you have questions or concerns about your individual situation, it is strongly recommended you consult a licensed professional to talk about things that are specific to you. If there is an emergency, it is strongly recommended you seek treatment at your nearest emergency room.
I just had a real interesting conversation with Dr. Timothy Benson. He's a Harvard-trained psychiatrist. I'm going to read his resume. Harvard-trained psychiatrist, assistant medical director of the NBA's Players Assistance Anti-Drug Program, author of the book Surviving Success: 7 Critical Skills Needed to Thrive in Athletic, Academic, and Professional Spotlights, a consultant to the NFL and NBA. That's some of the interesting part. What's most interesting to me is how down to earth and humble and authentic and easy to speak to Dr. Benson is. Our discussion was about successful, visible performers and athletes, and we really got a good glimpse into the life and journey of someone who has such pressure and challenge in terms of performance and in terms of all the pressures and the gravity of the pressures that come with being such a high-level performer. So I found it very interesting, and I'm sure there's so much to learn from Dr. Benson. I hope you enjoy it. What an honor for me. Tonight I get the privilege of speaking to Dr. Timothy Benson, and the first thing I want to say to you is that your motto is called Helping the Best Get Even Better, and I want you to know what this podcast is called is Getting Better to Get Even Better. So I think we're thinking similarly. So I think I'm on a good track here.
Yes, we are.
So I hope it's not a copyright infringement, but Helping the Best Get Even Better. I didn't steal it from you, I promise you. But I like the idea of getting better to get even better. And the spirit of the discussion for me is I want to speak to mental health professionals who have skill sets and things that are just so interesting. And I'm interested in anybody who works in the field of mental health and what they do and what they're interested in, how they help really get people better, right? I'm interested in who are the people, and I've talked to so many interesting people. And it's, again, such an honor to speak to you. And I'd like to hear, for the audience, this is a big ticket conversation to me. Dr. Benson is the assistant medical director of the NBA's Player Assistance Anti-Drug Program. You wrote a book, Surviving Success: 7 Critical Skills Needed to Thrive in Athletic, Academic, and Professional Spotlights. You're a consultant to the NFL and NBA. What's the story? How on earth do you go from being born to having all that experience?
Well, that's a great question. And, so I am a psychiatrist by training. And I will say that in a million years, I would have never thought that I would have become a psychiatrist because, my journey started with the idea of becoming an orthopedic surgeon. And I was, an athlete both in high school and college. And the natural progression is for, a lot of the athletes to gravitate towards sports medicine. But during my, my medical school tenure, I just fell in love with psychiatry. And the biggest thing there was, it was all about matters of the mind. I had always been, even from high school, reading motivational books and always curious about what makes the difference between those who are in similar, circumstances, who rises and who falls. And, on the concept of getting better, what was it? And, what was the resilience factors that enable one to kind of overcome major obstacles. So I'd always been curious about those topics.
So you knew as you were in college, did you have a sense I'm going to become a doctor?
Yeah, I decided I was going to become a doctor when I was in high school after a football injury, and then the relationship that I had with the orthopedic surgeon that put my thumb back together.
So you knew that you want to help, in some ways, help people, who may be dealing with struggles, right, in the
Yes.
way of injury. But then, how did you transform that into, matters of the mind? What went from the physical body to the mental body?
Well, I tell you this: I had an experience in medical school when I was on the cusp of making my decision to go into surgery or psychiatry, and I was on a sports medicine rotation, and I find myself examining the knee of an injured player, an injured athlete. And what I found most fascinating was not, as I was examining it, not what was I wasn't fascinated by which ligament had been torn, but more so on how he felt that injury would impact his ability to perform and his trajectory in terms of athletics. So I was always more interested in the story and how people thought of that, because, most powerful thing that we have, that each of us have, is our perspective on things. So, right there, then and there, I really started honing in on, matters of the mind, because I know that can make, a big difference in someone's health.
So as a non-athlete, and I'm going to identify that way, although I want to say for the record that I am in a master swim class, but as a non-competitive athlete, right? If I get hurt, it's going to be a bummer that I can't work out, right? And I'm a layperson. I have this idea as a layperson in the world of sports that it's probably very disappointing, right? But I can talk about it. But what's it like front and center as an athlete yourself to witness someone who's got a goal, such a big goal, and then has a compromising situation where what is the gravity of that situation like for that individual? And even more, what don't we know as the people of the world who are just sports fans or fans of anybody who fans of a musician or fans of anybody who has visible success?
Mm-hmm. I will say the biggest thing that, let's say, the individuals I have to work with who've had injuries, the biggest thing is the loss of invincibility. And, a lot of elite athletes or performers, along the way have developed this mindset of, I can't be defeated, or, there are things that, that I can do that I'm exceptional at, and I'm not thinking of anything else in terms of what may derail me. But when an injury happens, there's a rude awakening that the dreams that you may have had based upon the kind of mindset that you've had and that focus, now there's another element to it. Now it ushers in doubt. And, what a lot of people don't realize is that in some of these, elite athletes and performers, there's a lot of self-doubt, and a lot of their success has become from, really trying to prove themselves. So you can understand how devastating it can be if someone injures himself.
So I'm this individual who rises, who really rises relative to his or her peers, is going to rise to the top, right? Especially in the small community. It's unlikely that, statistically, how many people can actually rise to a certain level. There's only a few spots.
Right.
So I have a very determined personality, I'm imagining, if I'm that individual, very determined and very invested. And I have a setback, and the setback could be, one form of setback could be, hey, I had this injury is really, really compromising my mission. this wasn't supposed to happen.
Right.
Because I'm determined and this is breaking my opportunity and my flow, and I'm devastated by a physical injury. And that creates what you're saying is that the invincibility starts to unravel into, and what develops is self-doubt.
Exactly.
Now injury is not the only, physical injury isn't the only avenue of self-doubt, I would imagine.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I mean, when people come to my office, usually there has been something that has happened that has been a disruption to their life. It could be, whether it be substances, whether it be relationship challenges, but something has disrupted the normal flow. And so there is, a loss there that has happened in one form or another. So that sets the stage for someone to, in the best case scenarios, to ask for help or to start seeking out help. But with a lot of elite performers, that can be very difficult because they, a lot of times, most people come to them and they don't necessarily have to reach out to others because they've been so successful.
So in the road on the way to in the determined space where they're invincible and they are just crushing it and rising above the pack, and they're the best in their high school, and then they're the best in their college, and then they're rising the ranks into some sort of professional, whether it's music, whether it's sports, or, whether it's academics, they're rising the ranks. They're not going to reach out to you when everything's going well. So you are saying you meet them usually when there's some sort of episode, something, a compromised relationship, physical health problems, maybe a family problem, something derails the mission and they come to you hurting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? Let me actually back up, because the foundation for the work that I do with these athletes and high performers really stems from my own experience. As an athlete, and at one point I was one of the top scholar athletes in the country. Went to medical school. Had a dean's scholarship, et cetera, and was, riding high on the world.
Crushing it.
I was crushing. I was good. But lo and behold, life has a way of, blindsiding you and actually humbling you at the same time. So for me, the downfall happened when I went to medical school because of the losses that I had not anticipated. The loss of the structure that, let's say, football had provided for me, the loss of the community, the loss of the identity of being an athlete. And, so there was a lot of losses. But my biggest downfall was I was afraid to ask the questions that I thought I should already know the answers to. And this is what I see with a lot of people that I work with, is that they assume.
What do you mean by that?
So
what are the questions?
The questions on, basically, am I doing this right? Right. So when you're in a highly competitive environment, such as, medical school, you look around and you see everybody performing, these are all top 1%ers. Right. So I had to deal with the fact that I was no longer special as well. So, so then you start to question, because everybody else looks like they have it all together. So therefore, a lot of times, you have to really embody this persona that, okay, I'm here, and I know what needs to be done. And a lot of times that's behind closed doors. That's not the truth. There's a lot of people who are struggling to ask, struggling for answers. And are afraid to ask them, and that was for me. But things turned around when I finally reached out for help.
That's very interesting. So let's say I'm like a Dr. Tim Benson, but instead of going to medical school, I end up getting drafted into some sort of football system, or I'm a minor league baseball player, and I was the best in my college, and all of a sudden on a sports team, I'm one of many who were also the best.
Yes.
And so even if I stay within the sports arena or I go to a different arena, I'm so used to being attended to and also having a certain type of ease in that space. I get a lot of attention, I get a lot of validation, and I know how to make it work in that space. And whatever setbacks I have, I'm used to the challenges. And here I am in a new arena where I'm one of many, and I start doing this compare despair thing, right? Like I'm starting
Right.
to assess myself based on everybody else and how great like their Facebook page looks to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm measuring their social media and smiles and weekends and saying, "Uh-oh, I'm missing something." And I don't want to start talking about, there's an important discussion that takes a lot of humility, right? Which
Right.
is, I don't feel special anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I can have this in medical school too. And I can have this in the NBA, and I can have this in the, Major League Baseball, and I can have this in academics.
Absolutely. And in the professional world, let's say you get promoted and you get to the, new position or leadership positions. A lot of times what people don't realize is that there are a lot of losses that come with success. And, I speak in my book about grieving the losses of success. Because when you think about it, you can lose confidence, and community. Those three things are major losses that we have to deal with. And if you're not,
so confidence, community, and what was the third one?
Yeah, competence, meaning that
competence,
again,
confidence, and community. The three C's.
Yes, exactly. So if you're not, again, if you're not really talking about that, processing that, addressing that, then I find that there are a lot of people who are lost in that, and have a problem finding their footing.
So I have isolation because I don't have community.
Right.
I have self-doubt, and I question my ability to execute. Right.
Correct.
And so that's the competence. And I'm starting to create, the self-doubt is eroding, and it's creating an isolation, and I'm starting to lose confidence and question my ability to walk through it. So just the ability to verbalize it and have a space and a permission to struggle goes a long way. I'm curious, when you treat people and they're coming to you, and this is for the clinician out there and anybody who's interested, what, you mentioned substance abuse, you mentioned relational issues, pain. What does it look like to be the visible person who's struggling with these things coming in? What does the presentation look like?
Well, the presentation can look, it can vary. The best, especially it depends on how you're coming in. Because a lot of times, if you're being forced in, or you're being dragged in by, let's say, a spouse or a significant other, so a lot of times, the initial presentation can be that of whether it be anger, frustration, etc. And there's a saying that we all have our ways of saying hello, right? To make the atmosphere comfortable. So it's always interesting, and again, there's a lot of frustrations and a lot of doubt that becomes kind of paramount in terms of what they want to get help on.
So if I come from an institution, for example, whether it's a sports organization or it's a academic institution or it's a hedge fund, right? And I'm a top earner, and all of a sudden I'm, all I have to see Dr. Benson, this is ridiculous. You can get that. Why are they making me do this?
Right.
Right. This is a waste of my time, right? This is not what I need. It's the last thing I need. That could be one presentation.
Absolutely.
Right. It's not my fault that I got a DUI. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Right. But I guess it's what I have to do. Damn it. Right. That's right. That's a presentation. So you're the art of the Dr. Bensons of the world, or how do I say hello? How do I reach this person who doesn't want to be here? That's a presentation. Do they ever come to you in a way where they are actually Like, I am so drained and tired, and I am sick of this. I am sick of the pressure, and I just
Yes.
need to talk.
Yeah. But usually they are, like I said, something has gone awry to actually, push them over the tipping point. And yeah, so they do come in that way. And I will say that, typically the threshold is lowered by, word of mouth. So they talk with someone who they trust, and that person says, you know what, you go see Dr. Benson. He's really down to earth, and he can really relate to what's going on with you, and help you out. So that is always helpful in terms of, kind of, like I said, easing the entry into the work.
I would imagine that whether it's in, we have different currencies in this world. There's ego currency there's an academic currency of, publishing. There is a fame currency in any sport. There's also financial currency,
Yes.
right? There are different currencies. I would imagine there's a lot of beliefs and the relationship with whatever currency they're interacting with, right? That they're getting in such abundance on steroids, right? I would imagine some of the challenges that you witness have to do with the relationship with the abundance and the struggle with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you are being cheered on by 20 to 100,000 people, those dopamine receptors are on fire, and then. But we all know that, let's say, the games only last for a few hours. The rest is all about life, living life. So what a lot of people don't realize is that there are both negative and positive impacts of their performances, and it's about how do you manage that appropriately, and again, acknowledge it first. Being able to acknowledge that I'm struggling here, and I need some help. And it's very difficult for successful people in some cases to ask for help. Bill Gates said success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking that they can't lose. Right. So
It seems to me that there is a loss, and there's also an isolation in it where I'm kind of alone in my own island, and I get all this feedback, and perhaps I'm starting to question people's motives and what do they want from me. And is there a loneliness that you can see in this too, like who really cares about me, and what does it all mean? And it's sort of like an existential despondency.
oh yeah, there's a lot of isolation, and I would say that's probably one of the main issues and challenges that they have to work through, because again, there's this concept or this idea that nobody knows exactly what I'm going through. On the outside, everything looks great, but on the inside, I'm hurting, and I'm not able to show that because there's going to be this perception that I'm not grateful for what I have. So therefore, I have to keep it inside, because if I show any kind of, pain or vulnerability or what have you, if I speak about what's really going on, people are like, well, why do you care? I mean, you have millions of dollars, right? So what's the point here? So
Almost, how dare you?
how dare you?
Almost,
That's a great way to
how
put it.
did how dare you? How dare you have any issue when you are the top of your game, when you can, everywhere you go, you're praised. Yes, I know your big challenge is that you may get some criticism, and you can turn on your social media anytime and have a litany of criticisms, and I know it hurts, but come on, man, you've got boatloads of money in the bank. You can have any partner you want, right? Who are you to have an issue, is what I'm hearing. And really, 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 there's such an isolation in that. And yes, they do have vulnerability, and it's a hard game to keep up.
Absolutely. And it's very difficult to keep up that persona, and that's why you see some people just kind of come to a certain point where they crack. They can't keep up that persona anymore.
So here's my challenge question, and I really thought about this before I spoke to you, and I kind of struggle with it in practice too. I can't tell Michael Jordan to chill out and not try hard. I can't tell him, relax, what's really important in life. It's not cool, right? Like, I don't know if the message is, hey, I know you're really hurting and look how seriously it's really affecting you. Maybe you shouldn't try so hard to win and it's not so important. I was thinking to myself, does Benson do that? Does he tell them chill out? And is it like, if somebody came in my office and I don't want to kill their ambition, and I also want to help them access perspective so I was thinking the main thing I came up with in my contemplation is do your best and stay out of the results. Meaning that's all discerning what I can have control over and what I don't have control over. Am I doing the work needed? Am I doing that 10,000 hours of practice or whatever essence of work? But I wonder if a guy like me, just a bread and butter psychologist, if somebody comes into my office, I don't want to kill their spirit and I know it's their job. How do you grapple with that when you're saying this is so important? On some level, I get it. Is it really that important? It's probably not the most important thing. But then again, you don't want to give that message because that's been their dream. Do you know where I'm going? Do you grapple with this?
Yes. Yeah, and this is one of the biggest fears for actually some of these organizations sending people to, let's say, mental health, professionals, is because on one level, they don't want to have that fire taken out of them. Right. So there's what is this person going to say? Is this going to, is he going to take this person's drive away and by determining that there should be another priority, et cetera. So you're exactly right. There's this balance of try to reassure someone that, okay, it's safe to be vulnerable. In fact, there's strength in your vulnerability. We just don't often access that type of strength because it can be scary to get there. Excuse me. So what I try to really do is to really just kind of normalize the experience of, okay, you're really going through a rough time and you're pushing, but it's important to know and understand that even if you're at this level, there are other ways to kind of continue to keep growing. Because what happens with a lot of people that I work with is that they get thrust into high, intense, competitive environments, and their professional growth far outpaces their personal growth. And it's that gap that becomes the downfall for a lot of people. So when I explain in that way, we start to look at areas where, okay, what are some of the things that may actually be holding you back from getting that next level? We start with, I like to use strength-based approaches, meaning that, look, this is where you want to go. So we clearly identify where they want to go. And then I work backwards and say, okay, so what may be these things in areas of your life that may be holding you back from reaching that? So
you introduce the idea to them, so I'm clear. It's not that you shouldn't have goals. It's not that you shouldn't even take it to the next level, right? And it's not that you're anti. Dr. Benson's not anti wanting to win. Dr. Benson's not anti doing what I can to take my team, to take my company, to take my publishing to the next level, right? You're not anti that. But what you're saying is I want you to have a different relationship with it. And I also want to introduce the idea that if you have personal development and character growth, the experience of your ambitions will take on new meaning.
There you go. That's well said. That's absolutely correct.
You're not So in doing that, and I'm an executive, I'm an owner of a sports team, and I hear this, two touchy-feely dudes talking to each other about, feelings and vulnerability. I'm going to say, is this bullshit? Is this conversation a fire killer anyways? right?
Right.
How does this translate to, because getting better, first I have to define what does success mean to Dr. Benson,
Hmm.
and what does getting better to Dr. Benson mean?
That's correct. That's absolutely. So you have to meet people where they are, right? You meet people where they are, and then, like I say, ideally, you want to help have them drive the bus, and you just kind of be a guide and saying, okay, well, let's just take a look at this. One of the things that I do is, well, sometimes I'm unconventional in terms of, I'm a former athlete, so I know how it is. At certain points of my journey, I don't know that I ever would have talked to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Because I got it together. I can do this. And, my solution for everything is if things are not going well, I just got to work harder. That's it. Right. So a lot of my work is, helping these high performers understand that, growth can happen in two ways, adding more or subtracting some. Right. A lot of times we feel that we need to put our foot on the gas, put, harder down on the gas. But the real point of it, most of the progress happens when you learn how to take your foot off the brake, and we figure out what those brakes are in life. And when I speak in sports metaphors, and I actually have a whiteboard in my office, so I'm drawing.
You do?
I'm drawing X's and O's, and so I have to understand what my population is. They're not going to sit here and it's almost like if they sit here listening to me or talking, they're not necessarily used to that. But
So you speak their language literally, you speak it in their speak.
Exactly.
You're not like going to say like, oh, how do you feel?
Yeah, no.
You're not putting on that. You're not putting on that. I call it the silly NPR voice. You're not going to give them that, right? You're going to give them a real live, I get this experience. And in that process, what I'm hearing, you also identify what success means to them, and you help them clarify what is the target, right? And I would imagine sometimes there's a lack of clarity on actually what does success mean to you, right? If it's, I have to be the MVP, right?
Right.
And that's a lot. And that's a lot versus I have to make it here, whatever it is, you help them clarify. And I would imagine have a relationship with it that's, again, doesn't take the fire out, but also has a practical assessment, right? Of where you want to be. And then what steps do you need to take to get there?
Right. And I will say
so
that
some of it is problem solving.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And I basically have, a methodology where I just, the whole point is you come into my office, first thing we need to do, so the process is, to clarify, to confront, to commit, and to connect. And, those four factors are what we focus on. And clarifying what is most important is the foundation. Because, again, we have these goals, but, then you start to peel the layers back. I mean, what is this goal really about for you? I never felt good enough, or my father always told me that I would never succeed, and at the end of the day, I want to prove him wrong or that person wrong or something to that degree. So, so we have to get to that point. Let's clearly figure out what this is truly all about.
So it's not just I want to bench 200 pounds.
Right, no, exactly.
It's about really what's this all about. And we're in this space now. The final frontier of this discussion is, yes, we all know that the athlete, the successful person has struggles. The first thing we need to do is clarify what's this all about. What's really going on? What's your real goal? Then you said the word confront. What is confront? And this is the process of getting better. What is confront? What is confront?
Well, confront in a way that I use it is, confronting some of the harsh truths in life and in their lives, right? So some of the things that kind of come up on a repetitive basis are things like the theme of, life is not fair. That's a harsh truth. Life, isn't fair, or there are no absolute guarantees. Or another harsh truth is, the world doesn't owe you. The world doesn't owe you anything. So, I get a lot of people who get to certain points and say, well, I deserve this and I deserve that. And they get caught up and stuck into that. So it's important to kind of confront these truths because, true traction in life comes through the truth, not around it.
So it's interesting to me in this discussion, we're not talking about drugs.
No.
We're not talking about how they get high and what sexual activities have been exposed that shouldn't have happened, and that were too public, right? We're not talking about any corruption. We're not talking about any of the symptoms. We're not talking about high anxiety. We're not talking about clinical depression. We're talking about confronting certain truths and underlying beliefs that are driving that are part of your mission. And it's interesting to me, you didn't even mention symptoms. And we're talking about getting better. You're getting to know the person, first clarify, then confront. What was the third
Commit.
one you said?
Commit.
And so what does that look like?
So, committing is, once you have, you're clear and you can kind of confront these things. Now let's figure out, okay, what you need to really commit to. And a lot of times commitment means, how do we set things up in a way that we are directly addressing the things that need to be addressed on a consistent basis that will allow for the growth that needs to take place. And
so now we can get into symptoms, perhaps, because you have buy-in at this point. Now we have to say, you know what? I can't smoke weed and be a professional athlete in this state. Period. End of story. Right? I'm ready to take that on because I've confronted and I've started to look at the mission through a different light. I'm in a better space of readiness to start addressing my symptoms.
Right. And that's, again, and that's the foundation. And then once, that commitment is also solidified by, kind of routines and rituals, right? So the routine of maybe coming in and starting to talk about this or see me on a weekly basis, right? Or routines of, would be meditation, or routines of, certain things that, again, based upon the kind of the strategy that we co-create, then you really kind of, what does it mean to be committed to that? And then, I always ask the question, so what do I need to look out for in terms of when things start to go left? I mean, when you start to fall off, what should we be looking for here, right?
So there's a very practical side to you, which is not just unpacking, the pressures and living up to expectations, but there's also what is the discipline around your commitment?
Right.
What is the routine? What is the structure and the willingness to, the personal responsibility about living a life that looks like you're taking care of yourself, that isn't about dream interpretation or psychoanalysis or anything old school. It's kind of really coaching practical.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna tell you, this is what's so important. And, the relatability that people say that they have with me. They're like, okay, you're not like, someone who's always in their head and, really thinking about all these major theories and all this other stuff. I can talk to you. I get that all the time. And I'm a person that I'm gonna say, I'm gonna be real with you. Is that okay? And I already set the stage and say, look, there are going to be some things that you don't like that I say. And I'm not someone who's just going to sit back and just kind of listen and this and that. If I really see that we need to kind of go in, I'm going to be real with you. Are you okay with that?
Right. Real could mean I'm going to recommend that you meditate, but also can mean I'm going to recommend a mood stabilizer. Meaning, so it's not a shallow real. Real may mean, hey, I'm here to break it to you that you have bipolar disorder and we have to treat it.
Exactly.
So you can have some intense conversations. These would all be derailments in the commitment phase and in the confrontation and commitment of your process. And what's I know we're moving through in terms of getting better. We have the clarification, we have the confrontation, we have the commitment. What's the final chapter?
The connection. Connection is key. And that basically looks like who are those people who are going to help support you in and keep you accountable in this growth process? Because again, you're spending an hour with me at the most, but you're going to spend exactly. But you're going to be majorly influenced by your environment. So what does your personal board of directors look like? Right, everybody should have one, and they can't be a part of the people who are just yes men, right?
Right.
Who are those people?
I bet you there's moments of truth where the individual will look and see a collection of people and have a realization that the people in my life aren't exactly, my A team of people who have my best interest at heart.
Right, right. And it's that's part of the challenging work as well, because they sometimes are aware of unhealthy. They are aware of unhealthy connections that they need to dismantle, and those can be very hard or put in a different light. Because I get a lot of, let's say, athletes or entertainers who have a very difficult time in setting boundaries. And saying no is often equated with, well, they're going to think that I don't love them, right? So when we talk about these connections, we're talking about relationships and how they can disempower or empower one.
So the assessment of who's helpful in their lives, but also addressing the people pleasing and the courage it takes to say to somebody no, which even though you'd think that they're on top of the world, that may be harder for the performer than writing a song,
Right.
right? The act of saying no. And how do you establish the right types of connection after you have a treatment plan and after you have a commitment? What does it look like to have the right people in your corner? You called it a board of directors. I like that. Can I steal that?
Sure.
You sure?
It's a personal board of directors.
I've already stole your helping the best get even better.
Yeah,
So
well,
I just take another one.
Don't worry, my lawyers will talk to you after this.
So I just want to end with one thing. I want you to just share with us, and obviously, just in a general way, what's your example of a story of your work that just blew you away? Wow, I can't believe how this person came in and what they look like on the other side after accessing the help.
Wow. The one that comes immediately to mind to me is I had an athlete come in who was brought in by his spouse, and she was concerned that things weren't going well, professionally for him and also in the relationship. And he comes in, with his wife, and immediately, I started talking, and the wife started talking about what her concerns were, and then he just stands up, gets upset, and says, I don't need to sit here and take this. I don't even know why I'm here. The only reason I came here was because of you, etc. And you know what? I'm out. I'm done. So he just walks out. I finished, talking with the wife, and she leaves, and I didn't hear from them for a while after that. But then all of a sudden, I get this phone call out of the blue, and it was the athlete calling and apologizing for what happened, and asking if he could come in and talk. He came in, and we started our work, and again, it was very light, very just open ended. It said, I'm here. Let me just hear what's going on. Let me but also, there's also a desire, especially for athletes, to want to get good feedback too. They don't want to feel like they're talking in a vacuum. So, there's a dialogue, and, so they're used to kind of, being coached and et cetera. So they are able to grasp onto something, and you just help them work with it. Well, after a while, things just really started to turn around for this person, and he actually started exhibiting leadership skills with his team that people were starting to really observe. Was less reactive, and was able to do interviews, et cetera, in a different light. And a lot of this, I believe that it was him being able to be vulnerable, but also easing up on himself.
Wow.
Not being so hard on himself. Yeah.
So permission to be authentic with a Dr. Benson who speaks the speak, who quote unquote gets real, right?
Mm-hmm.
You saw a dramatic improvement, not only in relationship, right, but also in performance.
Yes.
And I would imagine you have a lot of those experiences. And I think that I'll finish with this. It actually, the framework which you described is probably helpful to any therapist,
Yeah.
any helping person, any agent of help in any way, right? The ingredients that you're describing, is not just for the athlete or the success story, right? It's
Yeah,
for anybody. Is
exactly.
that
Anybody.
environment? Yeah. Yeah, I really, really appreciate that. Well, what an honor, Dr. Timothy Benson. What an honor it's been to speak to you and learn about what you do. And I just had a great time. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and speak to your audience. And one of the key quotes that I keep running over in my mind in terms of growth, is the one that, if the quote that anyone who isn't embarrassed by who they were last year hasn't learned enough. And
let me repeat that. Anyone who isn't embarrassed by who they were last year hasn't. What was the final piece?
Hasn't learned enough.
Hasn't learned enough. There's certain humility, right?
Right.
And if I'm telling a different story, right, I probably need to do some good self-examination. Excellent.
Well, yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. That was great. I appreciate it.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
This podcast is for general information and entertainment purposes only. This should not be considered treatment advice, nor is it a substitute for an individual treatment plan. If you have questions or concerns about your individual situation, it is strongly recommended you consult a licensed professional to talk about things that are specific to you. If there is an emergency, it is strongly recommended you seek treatment at your nearest emergency room.